almost
most
ruined
radiant
everything before
smile
it
in
even
the room.
started. Not because I didn't like her, because I was afraid of
always
what
know
liking her
exactly
would
what to
mean.
say.
The night my CEO arranged my blind date with her daughter, I sat in my car outside Bianchi's for 18 full minutes. Engine off, hands on the wheel, staring at my own reflection like it could talk me out of walking in. You ever notice how fear disguises itself as logic? I told myself it was complicated. She was Margaret Wells's daughter, my boss, the woman who signed my paycheck, the woman who remembered every detail about my life whether I offered it or not. Her daughter's name was Jade, and I hadn't even said yes out loud. That's the part that still gets me. I never agreed.
We must
Margaret
proceed with
cornered
this
me in the
merger.
break room
The board
weeks
expects
earlier.
a united front.
Mentioned her daughter had
Your
just moved
hesitation
back
is
to
understandable,
Chicago. Said
but we
she was
cannot
too
falter
focused on
now.
work to remember she had a life. I made one mistake. I said, "That sounds familiar." Margaret smiled like I'd signed paperwork. By Friday night, I was walking into a candlelit Italian restaurant. I'm pretty sure she chose herself. When Jade walked in at exactly 7, I felt something shift. Not fireworks, not instant love. Recognition. She moved like someone who didn't waste time pretending. Blonde hair loose, dark jacket, no nervous performance, just direct. "You're Ethan?" she asked. No smile, just assessment. "Yes." She slid into the booth and said, "My mom wouldn't let this go, right?" I almost laughed from relief. Something like that. We made a deal before the bread arrived. 1 hour. Be decent. Tell Margaret there was no spark. Professional. Clean. Safe. Except somewhere between her telling me about forcing corporations to honor environmental commitments and her asking why I let my CEO take credit for my work. The performance slipped. She looked at me and said, "You convinced yourself staying quiet was safer than speaking up." 40 minutes in, she saw it. That unsettled me more than attraction did, because attraction is easy. Being seen is not. When she finally smiled, and a real one, small and unguarded, something inside me leaned forward before I could stop it. The hour turned into almost 3. Outside in the cold Chicago air, neither of us rushed to our cars. "So," she said softly, "this wasn't terrible." "Not terrible," I agreed. We decided to see what happened. Monday morning, Margaret called me into her office. She didn't ask if it went well. She already knew. She just said, "Don't wait too long. Jade doesn't let people in easily." That didn't feel like advice. It felt like a warning. And standing there in her office, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't afraid of Margaret being my boss. I was afraid of what would happen if I actually let Jade matter. I told myself it was just coffee. Just Thursday at a waterfront cafe. Nothing dramatic. Nothing life-altering. But I showed up 15 minutes early. That should have told me something. Chicago was cold that afternoon. Wind coming off the lake sharp enough to make you rethink your life choices. I stood outside the cafe pretending to scroll through emails I wasn't reading. When Jade walked up beside me, she didn't say hello right away. She just bumped her shoulder lightly against mine and said, "You're early." "Professional habit," I said. She smirked. "Or nervous." There it was again, that quiet accuracy. Inside, we ordered. She got black coffee. 1 sugar, exact, deliberate, I noticed. I don't know why that detail stuck, but it did. We sat by the window. At first it was light. Work stories. Chicago winters. How both of us hated networking events but were weirdly good at them. But somewhere between her laughing at a story about my coworker, Derek, and her telling me she once turned down a promotion because it felt strategically wrong, the air shifted. Not louder, closer. She asked about my last relationship. No one had asked that directly in months. I hesitated. I could have given the polished version, the clean one. Instead, I said, "She said loving someone half-present is exhausting." Jade didn't interrupt, didn't soften it. She just studied me. "And was she wrong?" she asked gently. That question hit deeper than I expected. "I don't think she was," I admitted. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, just real. Jade wrapped her hands around her cup like she was thinking carefully. "I do that too," she said finally. "Detach before something can hurt me." There it was. Vulnerability, small, honest. For a second, I wanted to reach across the table and touch her hand. I didn't, because wanting to felt dangerous. We stayed 2.5 hours. When we stepped back outside, the sun was lower, the lake darker. She didn't step away from me right away. "Okay," she said quietly. "This might actually be something." The way she said something, cautious but hopeful, did something to my chest I wasn't ready for. I walked her to her car. Before she got in, she looked at me like she was deciding something internally. "Let's not rush it," she said. "I don't do rushed." "Me neither," I replied. She nodded, then softer, almost to herself. "Good." She drove off. I stood there longer than necessary, because for the first time in 9 months I wasn't relieved to go home alone, and that scared me more than the date ever did. I didn't sleep much that night, not because something went wrong, because something went right, and right felt unfamiliar. I kept replaying the way Jade said, "This might actually be something." Not dramatic, not breathless, just steady, like she was testing the weight of it before committing. The next few weeks moved quietly. No labels, no announcements, just dinners that lasted longer than planned, and walks along the lake that neither of us pretended were accidental. But I noticed something about myself. I was careful, not distant, not cold, just measured. Like if I leaned too far into this, something would tip. One night we were sitting on a bench near the water, wind tugging at her hair. She was talking about a compliance case she'd been fighting for months, passionate, focused. I was watching her more than listening. "You do that," she said suddenly. "Do what?" "Disappear into your head." I blinked. "I'm right here." She shook her head slightly. "Physically." There it was again, that sharp accuracy. It wasn't accusation. It was observation. And somehow that made it worse. "I'm trying," I said quietly. "To what?" "To not mess this up." She looked at me differently then, softer. "You know that trying not to mess something up usually makes you mess it up, right?" I almost smiled. "You always this encouraging?" "Only when I care." That word landed heavy. Care. It was small, but it meant something. For a second, neither of us spoke. The space between us felt charged. Not urgent, just aware. I wanted to tell her I cared too. Instead, I said, "I don't move fast." She nodded. "Good, I don't either." But there was a flicker in her eyes. Uncertainty. Like she was wondering if slow meant steady or hesitant. And walking her back to her car that night, I realized something uncomfortable. She wasn't afraid of depth. I was afraid of admitting I already felt it. 3 months in, we still hadn't named it. No boyfriend, no girlfriend, just us. It felt safe that way. Until it didn't. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was steady, but too steady. "Connor reached out," she said. I knew the name immediately. The ex 3 years Boston. I leaned back in my chair at work and stared at the ceiling. Tiles like they could offer advice. "What does he want?" I asked. "To talk." Of course he did. There was a pause on the line. I could hear her breathing, controlled, measured. "I haven't answered him yet," she added. "I wanted to tell you first." That mattered. It did, but it didn't stop the tight feeling in my chest. "What do you want to do?" I asked carefully. Another pause. "I think I need one conversation," she said. "Not because I want him back, just because 3 years doesn't disappear without closure." Closure. Such a clean word for something so messy. I told her I understood, and I meant it, mostly. But after we hung up, I sat there at my desk pretending to review a client brief while my mind ran in circles. We never defined this. We never said what we were, so what exactly did I have a right to feel? That was the worst part. I couldn't even be angry, because she hadn't done anything wrong. That night I sent one message. "I'm not going anywhere. Take your time." It took everything in me not to add more, not to claim something, not to demand reassurance. She replied, "Thank you." Just that. The next 11 days stretched longer than they should have. We didn't see each other. We barely texted. I told myself space was healthy, but space can also feel like distance. And distance feels like the beginning of an ending. At work, Margaret watched me carefully. She didn't say much. Until Thursday evening when she stopped by my desk. "You look like you're carrying something heavy," she said quietly. I didn't ask how she knew. She always knows. "It's complicated," I admitted. She nodded once. "It usually is when it matters." That sentence followed me all the way home. Because if it matters, then I was already deeper than I had admitted. By day 7, I started checking my phone in ways that embarrassed me. Not casually, obsessively. Every notification made my heart jump. Every silence stretched. I kept replaying our last real conversation. Her voice steady, controlled, saying she needed closure. Closure with someone she once loved. I told myself that was mature. But maturity doesn't quiet insecurity. At work, I functioned. Meetings, deadlines, presentations. I even led a client pitch that Margaret later called sharp and focused. I didn't feel sharp. I felt suspended. On day 11, my phone lit up while I was standing in my kitchen staring at nothing. "Jade, can we meet?" "Friday, Waterfront 7. No emojis, no explanation. Just a time and a place." I replied yes immediately. Friday arrived heavy. The lake was dark and restless. Wind coming in long, cold sweeps. I got there early, again. When she walked toward me, she looked tired. Not weak, just worn. She stopped a few feet away. "I saw him," she said. I nodded. I figured. She slipped her hands into her jacket pockets, eyes on the water. He apologized, she said, and he meant it. That stung more than I expected. She looked at me then, but I didn't feel what I thought I would. I didn't breathe. I kept thinking about someone else the entire time, she continued. My pulse went loud. About you. The wind rushed between us. She stepped closer. I realized I wasn't confused, she said quietly. I was just scared to admit I'd already moved on. My chest tightened, and not from fear this time. Relief. You don't have to be careful with me, she added, voice softer now. Unless you want to be. There it was. The opening. The risk. I could stay measured, detached, safe, or I could finally say it. I don't want to be careful, I admitted. I just don't want to lose this. Her expression shifted, something between warmth and understanding. You won't lose me by caring, she said. You'll lose me by pretending you don't. And standing there by the water, I realized something uncomfortable. The only thing left between us was me. I didn't kiss her right away. That's what surprises people when I tell this part. We stood there at the railing, wind cutting through our coats, her words still hanging between us. You'll lose me by pretending you don't. I stepped closer, not dramatic, not cinematic, just enough that our shoulders brushed. I care, I said finally. Not loud, not poetic, just true. Her face softened in a way I hadn't seen before. Not guarded, not evaluating, relieved. I know, she whispered. That was the first time she reached for me first. Her hand slid into mine like it had been waiting there for weeks. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It felt earned. Slow, steady cold air, warm breath. And when we pulled back, she rested her forehead lightly against my chest like she trusted the space there. That trust scared me. Not because I didn't want it, because I did. The next few weeks shifted. We stopped pretending this was undefined. She introduced me to her friend Paula as the guy I'm seeing, then corrected herself mid-sentence. My boyfriend. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked deliberate. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt the weight of it. Boyfriend meant responsibility, meant showing up fully. One evening, we were cooking at her apartment. She was chopping vegetables with that focused intensity she applied to everything. Stay over, she said casually. I hesitated, not visibly, just internally. Staying meant waking up next to her, meant routine, meant this becoming real in daylight, not just in candlelight or lake wind. She noticed. You don't have to, she added lightly. I want to, I said quickly. And I did. But that tiny flicker of hesitation didn't go unnoticed. Later that night, lying beside her in the quiet, she traced her fingers across my chest absent-mindedly. You get scared when things feel stable, she murmured. I stared at the ceiling. Maybe, I admitted. She turned toward me, propping herself on her elbow. I'm not Connor, she said gently. And you're not your past either. That wasn't reassurance. It was a challenge. Because she was right, and I was running out of excuses to stay half present. Living together wasn't part of the plan. Neither of us said, let's do this. It just happened. 6 months in, I was at her apartment more than mine. My toothbrush had its own place. My jacket stayed on the back of her chair. One night, while we were washing dishes, she said it like she was commenting on the weather. You should just live here. I froze, not visibly, but inside everything paused. She noticed. Relax, she added, half smiling. I'm not proposing. I'm just tired of you pretending you don't already. I dried my hand slowly. You sure? I asked. She leaned against the counter. I don't invite people into my space unless I mean it. There it was again. Intentional. I said yes. We found a 2-bedroom on the north side of Chicago 3 weeks later. Big windows. Too much light. A balcony that looked over a street lined with old trees. Margaret showed up on moving day, with sandwiches and opinions about where the bookshelf should go. Third wall, she declared confidently. Jade rolled her eyes. It's our apartment, Mom. The bookshelf ended up on the third wall. Living together changes things, not in loud ways, in small ones. I learned she wakes up instantly. No slow mornings. Just fully operational at 6:12 a.m. Learned she goes quiet when she's overwhelmed, not distant, just internal. She learned I go still when I'm stressed. Coffee growing cold in my hand while I stare at nothing. The first real fight came 3 months later. I'd been staying late at work, taking on extra projects, canceling plans. She stood in the kitchen one night, arms crossed. You're doing it again. Doing what? I asked defensively. Half present, she said. The word hit like an echo from years ago. Anna. I went silent. Jade's expression shifted immediately. What just happened? I told her. About my ex. About the accusation that never left me. She listened without interrupting. I'm not saying what she said, Jade replied softly. I'm saying I want you here. Fully here, not perfect. Just present. And sitting there across from her, I realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't about fear anymore. It was about whether I was willing to grow. I didn't answer her right away. Not because I disagreed, because she was right. Sitting there at our kitchen table, I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the fight, and everything to do with pattern. You think I don't want to be here? I asked quietly. She shook her head. I think you want to be here. I think you're just afraid that if you give all of yourself to something, it can be taken. That landed hard. I stared at my hands. She moved closer, not confrontational. Careful. I'm not asking you to be perfect, she said. I'm asking you to show up. There was no anger in her voice anymore, just honesty. That made it worse. I don't know how to turn that off, I admitted. The part that pulls back when things get serious. She reached across the table and took my hand. Then don't turn it off, she said. Just don't let it drive. That line stayed with me. We didn't fix everything that night, but we talked for 2 hours. About work, about ambition, about how both of us default to control when we feel uncertain, about how love doesn't always feel safe, and that doesn't mean it's wrong. At some point, the tension dissolved, not magically, intentionally. Later, lying in bed, she traced lazy circles on my shoulder. I used to think serious meant inevitable heartbreak, she said quietly. Like getting attached was just a countdown. I turned toward her. And now? I asked. She hesitated. Now I think maybe serious just means worth it. That vulnerability did something to me, because she wasn't guarding herself anymore. She was choosing, and that choice made me want to choose back. The next morning, I didn't rush out the door for work. I stayed, made coffee, burned toast, let her laugh at me. Small thing, but deliberate. For the first time, I wasn't trying to avoid messing this up. I was trying to build it. And that felt different, still scary, but different. A year after that first dinner at Bianchi's, I went back to the waterfront alone. Same railing, same wind cutting across the lake, same distant city lights. Different man. I stood there thinking about the version of me, who sat in a parking lot for 18 minutes, because he was afraid to walk into a restaurant, afraid to risk, afraid to feel. Now I had a ring in my jacket pocket. I'd been carrying it for 9 days. 9 days of reaching into my pocket just to make sure it was still there. 9 days of almost saying something and stopping myself because timing felt fragile. You'd think proposing would feel like a grand, certain moment. It didn't. It felt quiet, deliberate, terrifying. The next evening, I told Jade I wanted to take a walk by the lake. It's freezing, she said. I know. She put on her coat anyway. We stood at the railing where she once told me she was done being scared. She leaned into my side casually, unaware. What are we doing out here? She asked, smiling slightly. I turned to face her. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I used to think being alone meant being strong, I said. I convinced myself quiet was peace. She watched me carefully. You were right about something that first night, I continued. I did convince myself staying small was safer. Her expression softened. But loving you doesn't feel small, I said. It feels like showing up. The wind tugged at her hair. She didn't look away. I took the ring out. She froze, not stepping back, just still. I don't want to protect myself from something good, I said quietly. And I don't want you to either. Her hand moved to her mouth. Jade Wells, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Will you marry me? For half a second there was only wind. Then she laughed, a soft, shocked sound tangled with tears. Yes, she breathed, yes. She grabbed my jacket and pulled me into her like she was afraid I might disappear. I didn't, and holding her there by the water, I realized something simple. The man who was afraid to walk into a restaurant would never have done this. She kept laughing even while she was crying. Jade doesn't cry easily. That's how I knew this meant something. Her hands were gripping my jacket like she was anchoring herself. Like if she let go too fast, the moment might slip. You're serious? She whispered, still half laughing. I've never been more serious, I said. That wasn't dramatic. It was steady, certain. She looked down at the ring on her finger like she was studying evidence. Then she looked back up at me. You really want this? She asked softly. There it was. Not doubt in me. Fear in herself. I don't want careful, I said. I want real. With you. The wind came in strong off the lake, but neither of us stepped back. She nodded slowly, like she was sealing something internally. Okay, she said. Then we don't do this halfway. We didn't kiss right away. We just stood there, foreheads touching, breathing the same cold air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Margaret, a photo. She'd apparently been watching from a distance with binocular-level precision. The message underneath read, "You did well, Ethan. Sunday dinner. Not optional." Jade read it over my shoulder and groaned. "She's going to be unbearable," she muttered. "She already is," I replied. But there was no fear in that anymore, just family. As we walked back toward the car, her hand slipped into mine naturally. No tension, no hesitation, and I realized something that felt bigger than the proposal itself. The hardest part of loving her wasn't the risk of losing her. It was letting myself be fully seen and staying anyway. At the car door, she paused. "I'm really glad I didn't cancel that first dinner," she said quietly. I smiled. Me too. And as we drove home through the Chicago night, I understood something I hadn't before. The blind date wasn't the risk. Walking in was, and I almost didn't.